Do you feel like you have low dopamine, that you're forgetful, that you're lazy, that you're insecure? Dopamine is the major excitatory neurotransmitter, putting us into a state of action where it is very much the gas for our car to do things that we need to do. Higher dopamine levels have been associated with a higher social economic status, higher social status overall, and higher levels of sociability and extroversion. And improving dopamine for 80% of the people out there will be absolutely life-changing. Except how do you do it and how should you do it? Because we all know those maladaptive ways of increasing dopamine in that you take from tomorrow to enjoy today, like a nicotine addiction, like alcohol, like coffee even. And this is all going to be person dependent because the main encoders of your dopamine levels, it's not epigenetics, it's not your behaviors or lifestyle, it is your genes. And that truthfully is what it is, where mutations, alterations, lower high levels of COMT enzymes, monoamine oxidase A and B, TAR1 density or activation, dopamine transporters, anything like that can all alter your endogenous dopamine levels. First mechanism is dopamine reuptake inhibition, in that you inhibit the dopamine transporter, keeping concentrations high in the terminal, allowing it to elicit its effect longer and stronger. And this is how the popular ADHD stimulants work, where they all inhibit dopamine and norepinephrine to varying degrees, giving that powerful therapeutic effect, except you eventually do have to pay the piper, where tolerance does build, unfortunately. The best for most people, as it is the most accessible, safe, and effective, will be phenylpiracetam, which is the most stimulatory racetam, where it is piracetam with an extra phenyl group, allowing it to cross the blood-brain barrier and directly impact the catecholamines, the dopamine, norepinephrine, where it is primarily a norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor and a dopamine reuptake inhibitor because of that, as well as it is a nicotine receptor agonist, which is pro-dopamine, and it's fairly safe. It's been a prescribed medication for decades now in Russia, and it's fairly easy to get, fairly effective. Another alternative you could look at is armodafinil, which is a more dopaminergic form of modafinil, and a lot of people report great success with that. Usually dosed at 100 to 200 milligrams, stronger effects on an empty stomach or taken sublingually. Next, there are precursors, the L-tyrosines, the L-dopas, and the L-phenylalanines. These are amino acids that are the direct precursors to dopamine, the building blocks, if you will, giving your body the raw materials to synthesize more dopamine. It's very akin to supplying the fire with more wood so that it can burn brighter, longer, and stronger, where precursors can allow your body to do the same, where it is the supply, it is the fuel, and it is the essence of dopamine. I would suggest D-L-phenylalanine over L-tyrosine just because it has a more multifaceted effect profile, and it's higher up in the dopamine synthesis pathway, as well as it can act as a TAR1 receptor, as part of it gets converted into phenylethylamine, which is an agonist at those receptors, and those receptors are very coveted for dopamine, and it's one of the primary targets of amphetamine and why it has such pro-dopamine effects. It's an easy thing to take, best on an empty stomach, as all amino acids are. Then you'd want to augment dopamine synthesis in one way or another, and the easiest way would be increasing the expressions of tyrosine hydroxylase and dopa decarb, are very much the gatekeepers controlling how much L-tyrosine and all of that is converted into dopamine. And it is kind of the holy grail because this can increase dopamine without the crash, which is super extraordinarily beneficial. And the most easy, accessible, and effective way for people to do this is with bromantane, which is a Russian atypical stimulant that has been prescribed for decades for neuroasthenia, essentially cognitive malaise, and it's only recently stopped being prescribed due to a patent and a licensing issue, except it's very effective for increasing overall dopamine synthesis long-term after cessation of use. So if you use it for a couple months, you'll still notice the pro-dopamine synthesis effects a couple months later, which is very beneficial. It is an anxiolytic, or at least classified as in some studies. There's a different dose-dependent response depending if you take a smaller dose or a higher dose, where the higher doses are more sedating and the smaller doses are more stimulating. You can take it orally, sublingually, or nasally. Those latter two are going to give you stronger effects because they're better route of administration methods. You could also look at a B complex that you can get from any grocery store that's ever existed because they're very accessible. You could just start off with a cheap one or so and just go from there. Different B complexes will work for different people because some people have methylation issues and they respond better to synthetic B vitamins. Other people respond better to methylated B vitamins, and other people respond better to incredibly low doses of B vitamins. So it is kind of person dependent, but something very worthwhile to experiment with because a lot of B vitamins are quintessential for dopamine synthesis, like vitamin B1, B6, B9, and B12 are all vital in that process, as well as B3 too. Is dopamine receptor upregulation, where it doesn't perfectly equal more activation, except it is a helpful and pro-dopaminergic thing to do, where the idea is that if you upregulate these receptors and you increase density, there are more binding sites for the neurotransmitters to affect. Therefore, you should experience higher levels of those neurotransmitters. And there's two compounds that can quite famously do this. There is acetyl L-carnitine, which is an ulcerated form of L-carnitine itself, which can upregulate the dopamine D1 receptors, which are preferentially located in the prefrontal cortex, as well as upregulate nerve growth factor, as well as is very good for mitochondria function, which mitochondria are essential to every aspect of health. Honestly, crazily, so it's good in that way. Next, there is uridine monophosphate, which can upregulate the dopamine D2 receptors, and those receptors are preferentially located in the striatum, which is the goal epicenter of the brain. Hence, uridine is very good for goal-directed action, where you do more of what you should do, as well as it can increase levels of nerve growth factor and has a platitude of positive effects for cognition. Found naturally in brewer's yeast or beer, so you probably consume some already without knowing it. Some people take it in the morning, some people take it at night, so it kind of depends on you and whether you find energizing effects from it. Next, you'd want to lower prolactin, which prolactin is as it sounds, where it is pro-lactate, so it's pro-milk, so it's anti-testosterone. So you'd want to avoid it if you're a man, and very much it has an inverse relationship to dopamine, where prolactin high, dopamine low. So you want to make sure that you can limit it. And whenever you do the deed and you notice that refractory period where you can't go again for some period of time, that's because of a prolactin spike. So if you can lower that spike, you can go again. P5P, which is a methylated form of vitamin B6, is the best way to do this for most people, in that it functions as an indirect dopamine agonist. It is available everywhere in the world. It works synergistically with other precursors to increase dopamine synthesis. And the worry of peripheral neuropathy from high doses of vitamin B6 for a long period of time is only a concern with synthetic vitamin B6. This methylated form, it is a non-issue. I would say it is still worthwhile to take P5P with a B complex because there's benefits to supplementing it on its own. Those are the fundamentals of the stack, where it very much is the banana split, where it is the core of it. And now we're gonna talk about the cherries on top, the sprinkles, all of those different modifiable pathways that you can pursue, and it's gonna kind of depend on your biology and your individuality, whether it works for you or not. And if you wanna know about a compound that is very cheap, very effective, that can cure your allergies permanently, yes, actually permanently, check out this video on screen and you can see what it is all about.